Mara Ellison knew the date was wrong before she noticed the blood on the courthouse clerk's cuff. May 8, 1936, she murmured, staring at the quotation printed inside the wedding program. The clerk stopped arranging the programs on the side table. Is there a problem? The Greyhaven dock strike began on May 18th. Mara traced the incorrect date with one polished fingernail. Her father had made that same mistake in the lesson plans she inherited after his death. It had never been an accident. Samuel Ellison believed students remembered history better when they found the error themselves. But Daniel had selected the quotations for their ceremony. Across the bridal chamber, Tessa adjusted the sleeve of Mara's ivory dress and caught her gaze in the mirror. "What is it?" Before Mara could answer, shouting erupted beyond the closed doors. Then came the first gunshot. The clerk dropped the remaining programs. A dark red stain spread from beneath the cuff of his shirt. Tessa moved in front of Mara. That was inside the building. The ceremony hall doors flew open. Daniel Mercer stumbled through them, still wearing the navy suit Mara had helped him choose. His tie hung loose. A locked metal case swung from his hand. For one wild second, relief overwhelmed every question. Daniel. He looked at her, but there was no joy in his face, only panic. His gaze shifted past Mara toward the courthouse entrance. A man in a black coat had appeared between the marble columns. Daniel went white. He crossed the room in 3 strides and seized Mara's coat from the back of a chair. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "I'm sorry." He shoved something into the inner pocket. Another shot cracked through the hall. Glass shattered. Wedding guests screamed and dropped behind the benches. Daniel flinched, clutched the metal case to his chest, and ran toward the judge's corridor. "Daniel!" He did not look back. The man Mara was supposed to marry abandoned her at the altar before the ceremony had even begun. Tessa grabbed Mara's hand. "Rear exit. Now." They reached the service corridor as 2 armed men rushed from the stairwell. One wore a police tactical vest without a badge. The other raised his pistol toward them. A deeper voice cut through the chaos. "Put it down." The man in the black coat stood at the opposite end of the corridor. He had dark hair touched with gray at the temples, and a thin scar crossing his left eyebrow. 2 men flanked him, but neither moved until he did. The gunman fired. The stranger pulled Mara behind a stone pillar as bullets struck the wall. His men answered with controlled shots. The attacker fell, his weapon skidding across the marble. Mara recognized the stranger then. Lucian Varga, shipping magnate according to the newspapers. Mafia boss according to everyone who knew better. Tessa was crouched behind an overturned cart several yards away. One of Lucian's men reached her first. Mara tried to move toward her, but Lucian caught her arm. "Your sister is being taken through the east exit. Let me go. The police entering this building will arrest you. I'm the bride." "That will not protect you." He pulled her through the rear doors into cold rain. A black armored sedan waited at the curb. Mara dug her heels into the pavement. "I'm not getting into your car." Police radios crackled from the approaching cruisers. A dispatcher's voice carried through the rain. Suspect identified as Mara Ellison. Possible accomplice to Assistant Prosecutor Mercer. Believed to possess stolen municipal evidence. Mara stopped resisting. Lucian opened the rear door. "That accusation was prepared before the first shot," he said. "You can argue with me somewhere. You will survive long enough to finish the sentence." Inside the moving car, Mara searched her coat and found a city access card she had never seen before. Daniel's final gift to his bride. A felony planted inches from her heart. "Where is my sister?" "Safe." That is not an answer. Lucian watched her with unnerving stillness. "She is with my attorney. She has a phone. You may speak to her when we reach the harbor." "You expect me to trust you?" "No." "Good." Mara turned toward the rain-streaked window. Because men who demand trust before offering truth are usually selling something. For the first time, Lucian's expression shifted. Not anger, interest. Varga Maritime Headquarters occupied an old customs building overlooking the harbor. Lucian led her into a conference room while one of his men placed the recovered wedding programs on the table. Mara remained standing. "I speak to Tessa first." Lucian gestured toward the phone. Tessa answered on the second ring. She was frightened, furious, and uninjured. Only then did Mara sit. Lucian pushed a wedding program toward her. Daniel altered those quotations to hide account numbers. No. His gaze hardened. You are certain? They aren't account numbers. They're dates. They are incorrect dates. Exactly. Mara uncapped the blue fountain pen she had carried since her first year of teaching. Beneath each quotation, she wrote the corrected year, then matched the numerical differences to 3 labor disputes her father had studied before his death. A Union archive. An old ferry terminal. A sealed harbor record. The room fell silent. My father made these errors deliberately, Mara said. Daniel copied them without understanding what they meant. Lucian leaned over the page. Can you find the records? Yes. Then you remain under my protection. Mara drew a circle around the first coded location and met the eyes of the most feared man in Greyhaven. You are not protecting me, she said. We are exchanging resources. By midnight, Mara had covered Lucian's conference table with wedding programs, city maps, and copies of her father's old lesson plans. 3 locations emerged from the cipher. The first was a Union archive donated to North Greyhaven High School after the old dockworkers' hall burned down. The second was the abandoned Bellwether Ferry Terminal. The third was harder. Samuel's altered date pointed to a harbor access record sealed under a classification that had not existed when he died. Lucian stood across from her, one hand braced against the table. You are saying your father predicted where a record would be stored 18 years later? No, I'm saying someone reused his system. Daniel? Maybe. Mara drew a line connecting the 3 locations. Or someone who learned it from him. Niko Petrov entered, carrying 2 phones and an expression of permanent disappointment. The police have warrants for Miss Ellison's apartment, her classroom, and her sister's hospital locker. Mara looked up sharply. My classroom? They are calling it an evidence search. The archive is stored beneath the library. Lucian reached for his coat. Mara closed the folder before he could take it. No weapons inside my school. If armed officers are already there, no students, no staff, no gunfight. His jaw tightened. She held his gaze. Those are my terms. After a moment, Lucian nodded to Niko. Confirm the building is empty. North Greyhaven High looked smaller after midnight. Rain darkened the brick walls, and police lights flashed at the far end of the block. Niko's driver let them out behind the gym, where Principal Priya Shah waited with an umbrella and a ring of keys. Priya took one look at Lucian and nearly locked the door again. Mara, the police said you stole confidential evidence. They said it before anyone had time to investigate. That does not make you innocent. No, Mara said, but it should make you curious. Inside, the familiar smell of floor wax and old paper steadied her. She explained the planted access card, the wedding program, and the armed men inside the courthouse. Priya listened with her arms folded. When Mara finished, the principal glanced toward Lucian. And I'm supposed to believe he is helping? No, Mara said. You're supposed to believe that the city scheduled an emergency inspection of our archive tonight, 6 months before they planned to close this school. Priya's expression changed. What closure? She led them into her office and opened a locked drawer. 3 days earlier, the deputy mayor's office had ordered a new property assessment. The document described North Greyhaven High as underutilized municipal land suitable for incorporation into the harbor redevelopment zone. They told me it was preliminary, Priya said. Kessler is moving faster than he should, Mara replied. The archive room had already been searched. Cabinet doors hung open. Boxes had been cut apart. A framed photograph of the school's first graduating class lay broken on the floor. Mara crouched beside the inventory desk. They took the Union collection. Priya shook her head. Not all of it. She removed a handwritten index from beneath the bottom drawer. I keep paper copies because the city's database loses things when those things become inconvenient. Lucian looked at her with something approaching approval. The index listed one sealed box transferred years earlier to Founders Hall. Before Mara could study the reference number, her phone rang. Daniel. Every muscle in her body tightened. Lucian held out his hand. Do not answer. Mara pressed the call button. Tell me why you ran. Daniel breathed unevenly on the other end. Mara, listen to me. Varga knew the exchange was happening. He used our wedding as bait. She glanced at Lucian. His face revealed nothing. What exchange? The case. Kessler wanted the archive codes, but I took more than he expected. You planted a city card in my coat. I panicked. You framed me. I was trying to give you leverage. No. You were trying to put distance between yourself and the evidence. Silence. Then Daniel whispered, I can prove it. Bellwether Terminal. 20 minutes. Lucian stepped closer. End the call. Mara did not. Are you alone? She asked. Yes. Then you'll wait in the center of the main hall, where I can see every entrance. Daniel agreed too quickly. Mara disconnected. I said no, Lucian told her. You don't get to say no for me. You believe him? I believe he's frightened. Frightened people reveal things when they think they're controlling the conversation. Lucian studied her for a long second. Then he handed Nico the phone. Prepare the terminal. Bellwether had been abandoned since a storm damaged its eastern pier. Wind rattled broken panes, and rainwater gleamed across the tiled floor. Daniel stood beneath the dead departure board, clutching the metal case. His face crumpled when he saw Mara. I never meant for this to happen. That sentence doesn't improve with repetition. He looked at Lucian, then back to her. Kessler told me your father hid records. He wanted me close enough to search your family's things. The admission struck with less force than Mara expected. Perhaps part of her had known from the moment he ran. How long? Since before our first date. And the proposal. His eyes filled. That was real. Mara's voice remained steady. Real feelings do not make a fraudulent life honest. Daniel lowered the case. Kessler killed your father. I can prove. A red dot appeared on his chest. Lucian moved first. He slammed Mara behind a concrete ticket counter as gunfire tore through the terminal. Daniel dropped the case and ran toward the eastern doors. Lucian fired twice, then jerked backward. Blood spread across his right shoulder. Lucian, I'm functional. He was not. His shooting arm hung too low, and his breath had gone shallow. Nico's men returned fire from the entrance. One attacker fell. Another shouted for Daniel. Daniel looked back at Mara. For one suspended second, she believed he might return. Then he ran beside Kessler's man and disappeared into the rain. Tessa worked on Lucian in a secured Varga residence overlooking the harbor. The bullet passed through, she said, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt. That does not mean you get to pretend you weren't shot. Lucian sat rigidly at the kitchen table while she cleaned the wound. Mara stood nearby with the objects recovered from the terminal. Daniel's empty case, a broken recorder, and the silver pocket watch that had fallen from Lucian's coat. The watch had stopped at 11:17. She turned it over. Inside the casing, beneath Emil Varga's engraved name, were two smaller initials. S.E., her father's initials. Why would your brother carry Samuel Ellison's name? She asked. Lucian looked at the watch as though he had never seen it before. He wouldn't. Mara pressed the edge of the casing. A hidden panel opened, releasing a tiny brass key into her palm. Lucian's composure finally fractured. Emil died because my family believed he had betrayed us. Mara closed her fingers around the key. My father died because the city called him careless. Between them lay proof that both stories had been lies. They knew each other, she said. Lucian looked toward the dark harbor. Yes. His voice had lost all authority. And whatever they found, he said, someone killed them to keep it buried. The brass key opened a deposit box that officially did not exist. Founders Hall was closed to the public, but Nico had obtained an emergency archival access order through a federal attorney he trusted. The order would not stop Kessler's people for long. It merely gave them a narrow window in which breaking down the wrong door would create questions. Mara used Daniel's stolen access card at the basement security panel. The green light felt less like permission than another piece of evidence against her. Lucian stood behind her with his injured right arm secured beneath a dark overcoat. He had refused pain medication strong enough to impair his judgment, but the tension around his mouth betrayed every step. "You should be resting," Mara said. "You should be in federal custody. That is not the defense you think it is." Nico led them through a corridor lined with steel shelving. At the far end, a numbered cabinet waited behind two locked gates. The tiny key from Emil's pocket watch fit box 117. Inside lay a photograph, a cassette recorder, and a sealed envelope browned at the edges. Mara lifted the photograph first. Her father stood outside the old dockworkers' hall, younger than she remembered him, one hand resting on the shoulder of a dark-haired man she recognized from Varga family photographs. Emil. They were smiling. Not like strangers forced into the same frame, like men who had survived something together. Lucian stared at the photograph without touching it. "He never told me. Maybe he believed telling you would put you in danger." Lucian's expression hardened. "Or he believed I was the danger." The recorder contained a damaged cassette. Mara pressed play. Static filled the listening room. Then Emil's voice emerged. "If this recording is found, Samuel Ellison and I have failed to deliver the manifests." The words stopped Lucian's breathing. Emil described Kessler's network in fragments. Shell companies purchasing waterfront property, police units moving contraband, union leaders threatened into silence. Then came the part neither Mara nor Lucian was prepared to hear. The Varga routes made Kessler's system possible. Lucian may not know the full extent, but ignorance does not make us innocent. Lucian turned away. The recording continued. Samuel had discovered that city redevelopment funds were being used to buy properties through companies controlled by Kessler. Emil had supplied shipping records from inside the Varga organization. Together, they planned to expose both systems. The tape warped, swallowing several sentences. Then Emil's voice returned. "If anything happens to us, the originals remain where the harbor was taught backward." The cassette clicked off. For 18 years, Mara had believed her father died because he had been careless near industrial machinery. For 8 years, Lucian had believed his brother died because he betrayed their family. Both stories had been built to protect the same men. Mara picked up the sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten statement bearing Samuel's signature and Emil's initials. It established intent, but not proof. Without the original manifests, Kessler could dismiss it as the fantasy of two dead men. Lucian looked toward the recorder. "My brother was working against me. He was working against what you were becoming." The words landed harder than an accusation. Mara gathered the evidence. "My father did not hide this so I could clear my name and walk away." Lucian faced her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this ends publicly. Kessler, the officers, the shell companies, and your organization, if the records lead there." Nico glanced at Lucian. Lucian could have ordered the cassette destroyed. He could have taken the statement and claimed it had never existed. Instead, he moved aside. "The evidence is yours." Mara searched his face for calculation. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing. I don't believe you. You should not." His gaze shifted to the photograph of Emil. "But take it anyway." Later, from the rooftop office of Varga Maritime, the harbor looked almost peaceful. Mara stood near the windows while Lucian struggled to remove his coat with one hand. She stepped forward instinctively, then stopped. He noticed. "I will not mistake assistance for forgiveness." "Good." She helped ease the fabric over his injured shoulder. The closeness unsettled her, not because of his reputation, but because he had finally given her something without trying to shape her response. "You could leave Greyhaven," he said. "Nico can arrange new identification for you and Tessa. And my students? The school can be funded privately. You still think every problem can be solved by moving people like pieces?" His expression tightened. "What would you have me do? Stay still long enough to let someone else make a decision?" For once, he did. Priya called before dawn. She had compared the emergency school closure with property transfer notices filed across 3 city departments. The transactions all depended on the harbor redevelopment agreement receiving final approval before midnight on Founders' Day. "That's 6 days away," Mara said. If the vote misses the deadline, Priya replied, the financing expires. The shell companies have to disclose their controlling interests before they can reapply. Kessler was not merely accelerating the project. He was racing exposure. Mara wrote the deadline across the glass wall of Lucian's office. Founders Day, midnight. That gives us leverage, she said. It gives him motive to kill everyone who can delay the vote, Nico replied. Lucian's eyes remained on Mara. We find the manifests first. To identify who had planted the access card on her, Mara asked to review Varga's courthouse surveillance. Nico refused too quickly. There are operational files unrelated to your case. Then isolate the relevant footage. It is not that simple. Mara recognized the tone. She heard it from students who had memorized a defense before understanding the accusation. What are you protecting? Neither man answered. She opened the encrypted folder herself. A detailed map of the courthouse appeared on screen. Entrances, police arrival times, Daniel's planned route, the location of the document exchange. The file had been created 3 days before the wedding. Mara read Lucian's authorization code at the bottom. You knew. Lucian remained silent. You knew Daniel was using the ceremony for an exchange. I knew he intended to transfer evidence. And you let the wedding continue. I placed men nearby to intervene. There were families in that building. My sister was there. I did not authorize the shooting. But you accepted the risk. His silence confirmed it. Mara's anger did not arrive as heat. It came as perfect clarity. You watched me stand in that room believing I was about to marry someone who loved me, while you waited to see what he would carry out. I believed controlling the location would reduce casualties. You made me part of your strategy without my consent. I was trying to stop Kessler. So was Emil. Lucian flinched. Mara removed the archive envelope and cassette from the table. You promised not to hide another fact that affected my choices. I was going to tell you. When? His face gave her the answer. When the truth became useful. Mara left before he could assign guards. She reached her apartment above the bookstore, just after sunrise. The lock was broken, and every drawer inside had been emptied. Her phone vibrated. An image filled the screen. Tessa sat inside a police transport van, her wrists bound with plastic restraints. A bruise darkened her cheek. Behind her stood a uniformed officer Mara recognized from the courthouse. A message appeared beneath the photograph. Bring the original manifests. Come alone. Then a second line. The Mafia boss does not get to use you twice. Mara had not finished reading the message when Lucian entered her apartment. He came alone. Rain darkened the shoulders of his coat, and pain had drained the color from his face. His wounded arm remained strapped beneath the fabric, but his left hand held a pistol. Mara turned the phone toward him. Tessa is at Pier 17. Lucian read the message once. I will bring her back. No. His gaze lifted. You do not know how many men Kessler has there. And you don't know whether killing them will get Tessa shot. I know how these exchanges work. So do I now. Lucian stepped closer. Mara, no more decisions for me. The words stopped him. She set the phone on the table beside the wedding program, Emil's recording, and Samuel's statement. You used my wedding as a controlled location. Kessler used Daniel to enter my life. Everyone keeps turning me into part of a plan and calling it protection. Lucian's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. You told me you would not hide another fact that affected my choices. I broke that promise. You did. There was no defense in his voice. Only admission. He placed the pistol on the kitchen counter and removed a black drive from his coat. This contains the complete financial and operational history of my organization. Mara stared at it. Shipping routes, payments, officials, properties, weapons purchases, everything Nico could preserve without alerting my captains. You brought me evidence against yourself? Yes. What do you want? Nothing. She almost laughed. Men like Lucian always wanted something. Immunity? No. Silence? No. Then what is this? His gaze lowered to the drive between them. The last decision I make without taking yours away. For several seconds, the only sound in the apartment was rain against the windows. You could spend the rest of your life in prison, Mara said. I know. You could run. I know. Why aren't you? Lucian looked at her then, and the control she had once mistaken for coldness was gone. Because every person I claimed to protect paid for the power I refused to release. His brother, Mara, the wedding guests, men whose names filled the files on the drive. He did not ask her to forgive him. That mattered more than any apology he could have offered. Mara took the drive. I still don't trust you. You should not trust a promise I have not yet earned. But I may trust what you do next. Lucian nodded once. It was not reconciliation. It was a door left unlocked. They reached North Greyhaven High before Kessler's men realized Mara had ignored the demand to come alone. The police search had stripped her classroom of anything remotely connected to Samuel. Books had been removed from shelves. Filing cabinets stood open. Even the photographs beside her desk had been examined. Lucian remained by the door while Mara walked through the wreckage. Your father hid the manifests here? He asked. He hid the clue here. She looked at the maps covering the back wall. Samuel had once taught an evening course in that same classroom. Mara remembered sitting in the last row while he prepared lessons, too young to understand why he sometimes mounted old harbor maps upside down, where the harbor was taught backward. She crossed to a faded map of Greyhaven before the modern port expansion. North pointed toward the floor. The frame had not been disturbed because it looked like decoration. Mara lifted it from the wall. A line of tape sealed the backing. Behind it lay a waterproof envelope containing original manifests, property transfers, and handwritten transaction codes. Samuel's name appeared on the first page. Emil Varga's appeared on the last. Lucian did not touch them. 18 years, Mara whispered. They were in my classroom for 18 years. Your father chose a place Kessler would consider unimportant. No. Mara studied the old map. He chose a place where someone would eventually ask why history was displayed incorrectly. Her profession had not led her away from Samuel's work. It had led her back to it. They gathered that evening in the school auditorium. Priya stood beside the projector, with city funding records spread across the stage. Nico worked from a laptop connected to 3 encrypted drives. An independent federal prosecutor listened through a secure video call. Lucian remained in the rear row, his injured shoulder rigid. The manifests proved the shell companies moved illegal shipments and purchased waterfront property, Nico said. They do not prove Kessler personally ordered the murders. Then we make him act, Mara replied. Lucian's expression sharpened. No. She looked at him. He corrected himself. What are you proposing? It was a small change in language, but everyone heard it. Mara displayed the Founders' Day ceremony schedule. Kessler needs the harbor vote completed before midnight. He also thinks I'm frightened enough to exchange the originals for Tessa. You will not bring him the originals, Lucian said. I'll bring a decoy. Priya stepped closer. And the real files, mirrored to journalists, federal investigators, union attorneys, and every city council member not tied to Kessler. Nico shook his head. He can claim they are fabricated, not if his own financial system reacts to their release. She pointed to the shell company accounts. When the records go public, he'll start moving money and contacting the officials who helped him. You trace the responses. Nico's skepticism became interest. And while Kessler is focused on Mara, Priya said, we transmit the school records connecting the property transfers to his deadline. Mara nodded. The ceremony becomes the first release. Pier 17 becomes the second. Lucian rose slowly. I can enter the pier through the south loading route. With your people? Mara asked. With the men I still trust. No. Kessler will expect them. He is holding your sister. And you are injured. His face hardened. Mara continued before he could object. He wants you angry. He wants you to attack so he can blame every death on the Varga organization. Nico closed his laptop. She is right. Lucian's gaze remained on Mara. What would you have me do? Go in without a weapon. The auditorium fell silent. Lucian gave a humorless breath. You are asking a Mafia boss to enter a hostage site unarmed. I'm asking a man who says he wants to change to prove he knows the difference between courage and control. His eyes did not leave hers. Then he removed the pistol from beneath his coat and placed it on the stage. A message from Daniel arrived an hour later. He wanted immunity. Mara agreed to meet him in the underground parking structure beneath the municipal courthouse, where federal agents could monitor every word. Daniel appeared without his tailored coat or courtroom confidence. His hands shook as he approached. "Tessa is alive," he said. "For now. We're inside Pier 17. Second floor office above the loading bay." "Who is guarding her?" "Captain Radek." Lucian's expression changed. "One of his own senior men." Daniel glanced toward him and continued. "Kessler offered Radek control of the harbor after Varga was dead." "What is Kessler planning at the ceremony?" Mara asked. "He'll introduce you as a fugitive who agreed to surrender. Then compromised officers will remove you from the stage. And take me to the pier." Daniel nodded. "He'll record a confession linking you and Varga to the courthouse attack. After that, neither of you leaves." Mara stepped closer. "You will testify." Daniel swallowed. "I want protection. You will receive consideration for cooperation. Not absolution. I loved you." She felt the old pain, but it no longer controlled her. "You loved the version of yourself you saw when I believed you." His eyes lowered. "That is not the same thing." Daniel agreed to wear a monitored device and provide the access codes Kessler's officers used at the pier. Before dawn, they gathered for the last time at Varga Maritime. The real manifests were already copied and distributed through delayed channels. Priya would begin transmission when Mara reached the microphone. Nico would monitor the accounts. Federal agents would wait outside the pier until Daniel's recording established probable cause and immediate danger to Tessa. Lucian studied the floor plan. "If they threaten her before the upload, you follow the plan," Mara said. His left hand closed around the edge of the table. "I could surrender myself now. Kessler may release her." "No, he'll kill you, keep Tessa, and finish the vote. My life is the simplest price. You are still trying to solve the problem by choosing who gets sacrificed." Lucian looked at her. Mara stepped nearer, but she did not touch him. "The man who used my wedding would walk into that warehouse and die because it lets him control the ending." His expression tightened. "What would the man you might trust do? Stay alive long enough to face what comes after." Lucian slowly released the table. "I will follow your plan." At sunset, the Founders' Day crowd gathered beside the harbor beneath flags snapping in the cold wind. Mara wore a deep blue dress beneath her winter coat. The decoy evidence case rested in her hand. Across the street, cameras turned toward the stage where Kessler waited behind a polished podium. Lucian stood beside a plain cargo van heading toward Pier 17. No gun, no guards. No promise that either of them would survive the night. Mara looked at him across the distance. He touched 2 fingers to Emil's pocket watch. Then he entered the van. Mara turned toward the Founders' Day stage and walked into the light. Deputy Mayor Julian Kessler welcomed Mara Ellison to the Founders' Day stage as though he had not ordered her sister's abduction. Cameras pivoted toward her. Beyond the barricades, hundreds of Greyhaven residents filled the harbor plaza beneath cold white lights. Teachers from North Greyhaven High stood near the back. Dock workers crowded the eastern rail. City officials occupied the front rows beneath a heated canopy. Kessler smiled for the press. "Ms. Ellison has agreed to surrender herself and evidence connected to the violent courthouse attack." Compromised officers waited at both stairways. Mara placed the decoy case beside the podium. "That is not why I'm here." Kessler's smile remained fixed. The microphone carried her voice across the harbor. 18 years ago, Union Auditor Samuel Ellison discovered that public redevelopment money was being diverted through private shipping companies. 8 years ago, Emil Varga found proof that the same network was using criminal routes and city police to control Greyhaven's port. The crowd shifted. Kessler reached for the microphone. Mara covered it with one hand. "You invited me here to confess, Deputy Mayor. You should let me finish." Across the plaza, Priya opened her laptop. The transmission began. Mara named the shell companies one by one. She gave property dates, account references, and the emergency orders used to seize North Greyhaven High. Reporters lowered their cameras and began checking their phones. Documents were arriving in their inboxes. Behind the stage, an officer spoke urgently into his radio. Nico's voice came through the receiver, hidden beneath Mara's collar. First account is moving. 2 transfers initiated. Kessler's composure finally cracked. Cut the broadcast. A city technician hesitated. Kessler turned toward a police captain. Remove her. The officers seized Mara's arms. She did not resist. That had always been part of the plan. As they forced her down the rear stairs, she looked back at the audience. The records are already public, she called. History does not disappear because powerful men dislike the witness. The crowd erupted behind her. The officers placed Mara in an unmarked van and drove toward Pier 17. At the warehouse, Daniel stood beside Kessler with a monitoring device hidden beneath his shirt. Tessa was restrained in the glass-walled office above the loading bay. Her cheek was bruised, but she was alert. Lucian stood 10 feet away from Captain Radek. He had come without a weapon. Radek had brought 3. Kessler entered behind Mara and locked the warehouse doors. "You embarrassed me for nothing," he said. "Those files establish suspicious transactions. They do not establish who controlled them." Mara looked at Daniel. He gave the smallest nod. The recording was active. "You controlled them," she said. Kessler smiled. "That is an accusation." "No, it is the conclusion supported by the transfer you ordered 7 minutes ago." His eyes changed. Only slightly. "It was enough." Mara continued. "The Croft Harbor account moved first. That means you knew which company connected the school purchases to the illegal shipments." "I knew because Daniel warned me." Daniel went still. Mara looked at him. Daniel did not know which account Priya would release first. Kessler's gaze flicked toward him. A fracture opened between them. "You also ordered Captain Radek to kill Lucian after the redevelopment vote," Mara said. "But Radek cannot inherit the harbor if your shell companies collapse." Radek turned toward Kessler. "What is she talking about?" "Nothing. You promised me Varga's roots." Kessler's voice sharpened. "Control yourself." Mara heard Nico through her receiver. 3 more transfers. Federal team has confirmation. She needed Kessler to establish the final connection. "Samuel Ellison found the original manifests," she said. "That is why you killed him." Kessler laughed, but the sound came too quickly. "Your father died in an industrial accident." "Then how do you know the accident occurred beside Conveyor 4? Silence. The official report had never named the conveyor. Kessler realized his mistake. Rage replaced calculation. He should have handed over the records when he was warned. Daniel's breathing caught. Mara kept her expression still. And Emil Varga? He believed his brother's name would protect him. Across the warehouse, Lucian closed his eyes for 1 second. Kessler pointed toward Daniel. "Take her confession and end this." Daniel did not move. Kessler's hand went inside his coat. Everything broke at once. Radek raised his weapon toward Lucian. Lucian struck the barrel aside with his left hand, but his injured shoulder failed when he tried to follow through. Radek drove him against a steel pillar. Kessler pulled a pistol and aimed at Mara. Tessa threw herself against the office wall. The medical cabinet beside her toppled, striking the fire alarm lever. Sirens exploded through the building. Emergency shutters lifted automatically. Federal agents surged through the loading entrances. Radek fired once. Lucian trapped the weapon against the pillar and forced it from his hand. He drove Radek to the ground and seized the pistol. Kessler froze. "Kill him," he ordered. "He murdered your brother." Lucian stood over Radek with the gun in his left hand. For 8 years, vengeance had been the only ending he imagined. Mara watched him choose another. Lucian removed the magazine, cleared the chamber, and slid the empty weapon across the floor. "No," he said, "you do not get another death to hide behind." Kessler turned his pistol toward Tessa's office. Mara struck his wrist with the metal evidence case. The shot shattered a ceiling light. Daniel tackled Kessler as agents closed in. For once, he acted before calculating what courage might cost him. Lucian crossed the loading bay and tore the restraints from Tessa's wrists. Nico's voice sounded in Mara's receiver. The complete archive is released. That included Lucian's internal files, his roots, his payments, his crimes. Mara looked at him through the flashing red emergency lights. He understood what she had done. He nodded. Not because it spared him, because it did not. 3 months later, Mara sat in the front row of a federal courtroom. Kessler was convicted of conspiracy, bribery, obstruction, kidnapping, and the murders of Samuel Ellison and Emil Varga. Daniel testified against him and received a reduced sentence. His cooperation mattered, but it did not erase the years he had spent serving ambition instead of truth. Captain Radek and 7 compromised officers were convicted with them. North Greyhaven High remained open. The harbor redevelopment agreement was dissolved, and the recovered funds were placed under independent oversight. Varga Maritime's legitimate operations became a worker-controlled trust. Lucian pleaded guilty to financial conspiracy, smuggling, obstruction, and racketeering. His cooperation dismantled the organization he had spent his life building. It also reduced his sentence to 4 years. Before the marshals led him away, he looked toward Mara. She did not promise to wait. She had spent too many years treating endurance as proof of love. Instead, she visited when she chose. She wrote when she had something true to say. She continued teaching and helped establish the Samuel Ellison Civic History Center inside a restored building beside the harbor. Her life did not pause. 4 years later, Mara stood inside the center's main gallery, adjusting the final display before opening day. The exhibit was titled History in the Margins. Samuel's handwritten statement rested beneath glass, beside Emil's stopped pocket watch. Nearby, students had recorded stories about ordinary citizens who challenged institutions more powerful than themselves. The front door opened. Lucian entered alone. No guards, no black car waiting at the curb. His hair held more gray than she remembered. The scar above his eyebrow remained, but the stillness around him no longer felt like a threat. He stopped several feet away. "I did not know whether you would want me here. I sent you an invitation. You sent one to everyone who contributed to the exhibit." Mara smiled faintly. "You always did read the fine print." His gaze moved toward the display containing Emil's watch. "I used to think power meant making certain no one could choose against me. And now? Now I think it means surviving the answer." Mara closed the file in her hands. Lucian looked at her with none of the certainty he once wore like armor. "Is there room in your future for the man I have become?" She thought of the ruined wedding, the black car, the blood on marble, and the years that justice had taken from them. She also thought of the evidence he surrendered, the gun he refused to fire, and the life she had built without waiting for permission. "There is room for the truth," she said. She stepped beside him and opened the gallery doors. "We can decide the rest together." They walked into the morning side by side, not toward a perfect ending, toward an honest beginning.